So please welcome a man who this is what he does. I mean, he's a criminal defense attorney at Wade Fink. You can check him out. He's a Detroit sports fan as well, so he knows sports. But please welcome to the show, Mr. Wade Fink. Wade,
what's up, doing, guys? Man? Oh, I'm doing great. I am grateful for that introduction and you guys having me. My wife is putting two to bed by herself, but she'll forgive me.
Well, I'll ask you, Wade. I mean, you saw this kind of come out as we did. Your professional opinion on this. Like, I know it happened weeks ago, and I don't know like the details. You obviously are more familiar with the state of Michigan and what can and cannot happen with this type of stuff. But what'd you make of it when it initially happened, and kind of the predicament Jamo's in, and how much is on him? How much is he at fault of this situation?
Yeah, I mean, so listen, we know what we know from the story, so we have to take the alleged facts as they are and the clips of video that we do have. I'll tell you this. Let me tell you the letter of the law, and then I'll tell you the practical parts, and hopefully that's helpful to your listeners. The letter of the law is this: you know, there in Michigan, in order to conceal a weapon, right, to hide it on your person or anywhere, frankly, you need a license, right? You need a CPL, we call it, concealed pistols license. And Jamo apparently did not have that. And a question has come up about, you know, whether or not someone else can possess or conceal someone's weapon, like his brother, who did in fact have his CPL. I should probably have mentioned both guns were registered, which is the first step in this. These are registered weapons. These aren't stolen or street guns or have the serial numbers obliterated or something shady like that. These are both registered weapons. And then the question becomes, do you have a CPL? Is it properly stored if you don't? Or is there other circumstances that warrant further inquiry? Technically speaking, by the letter of the law, his brother, right, cannot, by statute, cannot possess Jamo's gun and conceal it if the gun owner, the person whose gun you're borrowing, does not also have a CPL. So by the absolute letter of the law, if we were just to accept the facts as true that this was a concealed weapon under a seat, accessible to him, the stop and search of his and seizure of his person was all good. All those things happened correctly. By the letter of the law, that's problematic. But that's where a big part of this comes in. And interrupt me if I'm going on and too much.
No, you're good.
Narrative form. But that's where the big part of this comes in is we leave in this state and this country a massive amount of discretion to law enforcement. Law enforcement was police on the streets and prosecutors in making charging decisions. If police arrested or cited every single instance of criminal activity, that is whether technical or more than technical, you would have an even worse criminal injustice problem. We need police to be able to exercise some sort of discretion. And when you see a situation where you have two individuals who you now have identified who they are in relationship to the community with registered firearms, one of which has a CPL, the other from another state. He's been in this state for a couple years now since he's been drafted, doesn't have a CPL, but otherwise has a registered weapon. The police are absolutely entitled to assess the situation, whether this warrants a citation, whether this warrants an arrest, or whether this should result in nothing. They make that decision all the time. I have a client who started carrying his weapon 5 days before his license was actually issued. Got stopped in those 5 days. Good thing he had a police officer and later a prosecutor who was practical and used common sense that's not a good use of that statute, even though technically he was CCW, carrying a concealed weapon. It's a 5-year felony. Could have been charged, could have been pursued, and we wouldn't have had a defense. You need police to be able to exercise discretion. So I think Ross Jones, I'm sorry to name drop him on your show if this goes on.
No, you're good.
I think Ross Jones fancies himself a hero here, or an intrepid reporter who's happened upon some sort of corruption or injustice going on here. How is Jamo getting treated different than the public? When really he's done the opposite. That not only has he put Jamo, a young black man in the city, choosing to live in the city of Detroit, in legal jeopardy himself and his career, but he's also now put the pressure on police unjustifiably. Sometimes police should have pressure, of course, unjustifiably, which is just going to boomerang onto people who otherwise need police to use good discretion. And I assure you, there are a lot of people in the city of Detroit interacting with Detroit law enforcement who need good cops to use good exercises of discretion. That accomplishes none of that. And that's why this story, and I tweeted what I tweeted, and I think you guys saw, frustrates me.
Yeah, wait, and I just want to kind of get clarification on this, and this just, maybe it's a bad question, but it's kind of two parts. So just kind of taking what you said and what I'm seeing online, is this kind of just like I don't want to say like a nothing story, but essentially just like, hey, this could have been avoided. This didn't need to happen because of the report that's been put out there by, as you said, Ross Jones from Channel 7. And then kind of following that with this investigation, it seems like it's just like this. What is kind of the basis of the investigation? Is it just, hey, they're looking at how this kind of went about, like with the police officers, and they just wanted to make sure that it was done the right way? Is that essentially kind of what I'm taking from this? It was really nothing to an extreme. It was just more so, hey, let's do our work and make sure this is handled correctly.
Well, keep in mind that I'm reading this along with you in terms of where the process is. As I read it, reading between the lines, and just with my experience in cases, what I see here is the police exercise discretion to choose not to citation or make necessarily a warrant request, or certainly not go through with the arrest, which is a perfectly legal thing for the police to do. I want your audience to understand that. The police can make decisions based on their sound discretion of whether to arrest somebody, give someone a ticket, issue charges later. I mean, that happens all the time. That's what I think happened. And then I think the story comes out, and you have someone who really thinks that they're onto something, apply public pressure now to the police by not only exposing the story, but suggesting that there was something untoward going on, that he was treated well because he's a Detroit Lions player. And now you have these lines within the story saying it's being reinvestigated, or the warrant is being examined. So what I read into that is now the prosecutor feels pressure that we treat everyone the same. J-Mo's not going to get any special treatment in this county. We're going to review it, and this shouldn't happen this way, and this officer did this wrong. And that's what I'm saying by the effects of this story, despite how I'm sure this journalist feels about himself right now with his big breaking story. This effect of this story will only hurt individuals in their actions with police, because this was a good function of law enforcement. This was law enforcement going to their higher ups. They have a policy when they have high profile arrests, and they should. If you're going to arrest a judge, or you're going to arrest the mayor, or you're going to arrest a mother with kids in the car, you should have policies to evaluate the situation. Call your superior, call the sergeant. Let's talk this out and make the right decision. That's what they did. And that was a good exercise of discretion, and they can decide what to do later, whether this warrants charges. But to expose this in a way that, oh, J-Mo was going on and on, I'm a Detroit Lions player, and clearly someone had a wallpaper on their phone that made him a Lions fan, so that necessarily means something untoward was going on. That's not at all what the video bore out. Jameson Williams was sad and frustrated, it seemingly with himself, that he's got practice. I'm a Lions player. What am I? It was exasperation more than asking for something, at least as I heard it. So I hope that answers your question. It's not a nothing now that it's being driven the way that it is in terms of the narrative that somehow he got special treatment. What I want people to understand is this stuff happens all the time in ordinary interactions with non-famous people. Right. And it should. So trying to frame it that way to make it something necessarily untoward puts pressure on police and prosecutors that, trust me, you don't want them to feel as though they need to arrest and charge everyone lest they get in trouble later.
So this really, this could have been avoided if that story, like that could have brought that back to life and kind of essentially made this a bigger deal than it essentially was. Yeah. That's kind of
the reporter's at fault, essentially.
That's
bringing this all to light.
Yeah,
is that kind of word is.
That's crazy.
I'm sure that if you had Ross on this, he would push back on the newsworthiness of this story, and he would make the spin this into police shouldn't be treating citizens differently just because he was a Lions player, and this cop said something about, I think he said something to the other officer, I'm going to kill you too, or something like that in frustration. I'm sure that's the pushback I would get. What I would say is this isn't newsworthy, because what it has the impact of doing is placing undue influence and pressure on law enforcement to then encourage arrests and charges of a young black man on the Detroit Lions and a young black man not on the Detroit Lions. That is the concern that I don't think WXYZ even really cared to have the analysis of whether that was newsworthy for this reason. I'm not sure, guys, that there aren't there's some really good journalists in Detroit, really good federal court reporters, state court reporters. I'm not convinced that someone else just decided not to publish this story. You're publishing a non-charge, non-arrest, and now that's turning into pressure to now charge him with a crime. I mean, think about that. Is that a story to be proud of? Is that a Pulitzer winner? For me, it's not. For me, it's not.
That's a tough story to do. That's terrible, honestly.
And Wade, just to kind of get some clarification, because I know you kind of you spoke a lot about it, but just something I'm still kind of need a little bit more clarified. So a warrant was issued. Okay, that's either on JMO. Let's say it's on JMO. What's the worst situation that can come out of this?
Well, so you tell me if there's something. As I read it in the WXYZ story, is the warrant request is being examined. That's okay. What I read in the WXYZ story. Now, let me qualify that. If I'm wrong or there's better information, then this is irrelevant. But I'll tell you what that means as I read it. Police, when they do an investigation, in any case, whether it's a murder or a misdemeanor OWI, whatever it is, they put together their evidence, police reports, videos, whatever it is, and they submit that all in what's called a warrant request to the prosecutor's office. And ordinarily what that warrant request will say is, we suggest that you charge this person with X crime, or you shouldn't charge him with anything. So at some point, whether that night or now, as in light of this story, a warrant request or package went to the prosecutor with a recommendation. And now the prosecutor's office is reviewing whether to charge Jameson Williams with the carrying of a concealed weapon, which is a 5-year felony. The impact of that would be he'd be charged with a felony. And we've seen other players in the NFL be charged with felonies in various circumstances and the process that goes on from an NFL standpoint. From a legal standpoint in the state, he would go through the process, and he's got a very good lawyer in Todd Flood. That's what would happen if charges were issued. But my goodness, if they go from a situation where they felt as though the circumstances were, we shouldn't charge this based on, I said this before, but just to make it clear to everyone listening, you observe a situation and as police officers and prosecutors, and you want them to use common sense. You don't want them to be robots. If you see senior citizens playing a dollar poker at their nursing home, right? Technically that's unauthorized gaming, is it not? Do we want to charge the senior citizens with unauthorized gambling? Of course. Do you want an exercise of discretion? And as you look at this, you look at 2 registered guns that were not on their person. I have no idea if they were loaded, say what kind of, I don't know anything about that. But we have 2 registered weapons. One person has a CPL. Should JMO have had one? Yeah. And should he be more responsible about it? Of course. I'm not going to argue any of those things. But as you look at that as a picture, does that present a situation where you think, yeah, this 20-something-year-old should be charged with a felony in this circumstance? There are far more egregious carrying a concealed weapon, where people are prior felons and shouldn't have a weapon at all, where people are carrying guns that don't have serial numbers, are stolen weapons, and things of that nature. So there are, of course, appropriate uses of the statute, but we want police to look at situations and say, is this worthy of an arrest? Is this worthy of a charge? And here, I think globally on balance, this didn't warrant it. And reporting it now in this way might make that happen. And that's a tragedy. That is not something that should be given a pat on the back to the reporter that somehow he's done us good, because he's hurt us too, who have to have interactions with police for better or worse in the community.
Yeah. And by the way, I agree with Hakeem the Dream. I mean, wait, if we get into some crap, I'm reaching out to you, Wade.
Oh, instantly, man.
And I'm
this
glad
whole show has a get out of jail free card. All right. So put it in your wallet, and save it.
Well, Wade, I'm glad I reached out to you because, we obviously create content. A lot of this is breaking. I love to have a guy like you on that kind of break this down. We're looking at the reporter for kind of putting this story and making it, well, no, now the public has like this image of JMO because of the said reporter that made this could have been a big nothing burger between the police and JMO, essentially. Like they could have been
reported. It could have been reported in a balanced way about decisions that are made on a daily basis about whether to charge someone, emphasizing the fact that they were illegal weapons. We don't know anything about whether the stop was good or bad, how they stopped him, how they approached the car, where the gun was stored other than under his vehicle. Was it within his reach? Was it within his person? Was it next to his brother? Was it, all of these things, all it was done was to drive the narrative that the police gave favoritism to a Detroit Lion. And that is, something that they felt was going to drive clicks, I'm sure. That is my frustration. Not that investigative reporting is important, and there was probably a way to tell the story that didn't have the same narrative being spun online.
There you go. Check out Wade on Twitter, on X as well.
That was helpful. That helped me out a ton.
Breaks it all down at Wade Fink. Wade, you know what? I would say we'll talk to you again. Hopefully, we don't really have to. Hopefully, the Lions.
Make it about a Packer next time, or
there we go.
Love that.
Viking.
I appreciate you, Wade.
All right, guys. Talk
Thanks,
to you soon.
Wade.
Lions. All right.
Hey, what's going on there? It's Jeff Iafrate. Appreciate you for finishing the video. You can check out one of the videos here suggested or show support by commenting, liking, and subscribing. And buy your merchandise, FisherCTSports.com.